So my name is Mark Nelson. I'm a professor in design studies, which is in human ecology, which actually is right across the street. How many people have heard of human ecology? Yep. Oh, good. Yep. Maybe 5 years ago, I'd asked that. Nobody had heard of who we are, but it seems like we're getting out there some. How many people here have a Pinterest page? Anybody? Yep. How many of your students do you think have a Pinterest page? Do you think most of them do, probably?
Well, these things are not.
Yeah, I'd say.
Myself, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'd say for mine, I bet at least 90%. I usually check at the beginning of class, and I'd say 90–95% of them already have a Pinterest thing. So it's something the students use that they're out there. Facebook and social media, other social media is not always good for classroom use, but Pinterest is a way you can piggyback on something the students are doing already, and it actually works for, at least for the courses I teach, it works very well because we have a lot of visual content. I just thought I'd say a little bit about myself. You know, I've done different things. I have a place up north, and just to show I'm a normal person, and not just a Pinterest geek. So this is my interest. You know, I actually worked as a tannery worker years ago. I did a lot of different things over the years. I grew up in the military family. Anybody can use Pinterest. If I can use it, anybody else could use it. The thing about the overview is everybody does it if you're a student. And so I thought I'd look a little bit at the technical characteristics. If you haven't thought about it as an instructional tool, one thing is that it's searchable. So you can go on Pinterest and you can type in any type of thing you want, and you can search on it, which is very handy. If you go on Canvas and do a search, you get stuff for your class. You can't search everybody else's classes, but if you're in Pinterest online, you can search the entire world. So if you want to know about 13th century tomb rubbings from Transylvania, you could probably go on there, and I bet you can find something. I don't think I have time to do that now, but I often do that with my class. I just say, let's pick a topic and see what we can find about it. So it's free, doesn't cost anything, which is nice. Canvas costs a lot of money, right? I think the university's paying a lot for it. So we're not causing the taxpayers to spend any more money when we use Canvas, or we use Pinterest. There's a massive user database, and then the way it works is there are things called pins. I'll show you in a minute, and I think there's an exercise then with the data sheet that you're going to do.
We have options.
Yep. So if you don't have an account, you might be able to have a chance to do one right now. It doesn't take long. It's what they do is they call them pins. So if you post something on there, you call it a pin, and you pin it to a board, and we'll look at that. And you can pin content from the web. So if you have your computer set up, you can go to a website and you just find an image and click on it, and using the pin function, and it'll just put it right on your Pinterest page. It asks you where you want to put it, and which is very handy. You can also pin content from other boards in Pinterest. Since there is such a massive user base, if you want to, like I said, find out some obscure topic, find images for that, generally you can type it in and there'll be something there, and you can just pin it right on your board. And you can also do original uploaded stuff. So a lot of times we don't think of students as creating internet content, but it's very quick and easy. And so I have two examples I'll show you, one where we mostly pin from other places, and another one where we are actually creating our own content. So it's ideal for original photo essays. How many people do photo essays with their students? Anybody? In my area, I like to have them do that. I've been having them do it since before there was a Pinterest. So a lot of the ways I use it is to do things that I've always done, like photo essays or just creating collections of images. But it actually works really well in a way that other applications don't for what I do. And it's also ideal for where students are asked to observe, compare, or contrast anything. So I'll show you an example where we are looking for photos of conditions on buildings, because I teach about buildings. And they can go out and they just take their cell phone, and then they take a photo, and then they upload it right to a Pinterest board. So that's a way that not everyone uses Pinterest, but it's a way that's very, very handy for teaching, because sometimes we want to do that. You can also add text to every pin so they can do an analysis. It's not just putting images up there. And then other pinners can use your pins. So what's interesting is from my classes, when they put stuff up, all of a sudden I get this little report and somebody that I sometimes look back and somebody in England or Transylvania or somewhere like that will take one of the pins that the students have put out there and use it on their board. So it's a way to interface with people around the world, which changes the way students look at their education, because it goes from being a place where they're in a course somewhere and their stuff goes to the teacher grades it, it goes back to them and it doesn't go anywhere. Whereas when you put it on Pinterest, if your board is public, it goes around the world, and people really do look at this stuff and they use it. So it gives the students a way, especially like freshmen, to feel like what they're doing is tied into the rest of the world. And you can also create group boards where everyone can post. You can invite people who are not part of your class to post. And I haven't done this as much on the class boards, but I've done it on my personal boards, and I've been members of them. You pick a topic, anybody into like tattoo art or graffiti art, there are group boards for that, and there may be hundreds of people who are members of that board from around the world, and they all post to that. So that's another thing that's great about it. Someday they'll probably implement this for Canvas, that type of thing, because it is a really powerful tool for teaching.
So can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Are those, maybe you're going to get to this at this point here, can those group boards be limited just to your class, or are they, if you make it a group board, everybody can do it?
The type of group board that's built in is where you can make it where it's only people you invite.
Okay.
So there are different levels. It's just like most social media, there are different levels of access.
Got it.
But the way it's set up or optimized is for group boards to be for people that have permission.
Okay.
And it would be typically they're around a topic. So if you pick a topic like, I bet there's one for, maybe there might be one from UW-Madison sites or something, and there'd be people posting to that. But you can also limit it to people in your class. You can also make the boards private.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I choose never to do, because I think it's good for the students to get out there and feel like they're part of the bigger world, and Pinterest lets them do that. But you can do that where only people in your class can see it. But and I'll talk a little bit about the privacy issues, which is, to me, that's the drawback. So that's my next slide. I think the issue is that privacy can be a problem, because we have FERPA and we have these other things where we're not supposed to show people what our students are doing, and so sort of a twist on that is if nobody knows that it's your students doing it, it probably isn't a problem, right? So Pinterest is very public, or can be, even though you can set it so only people that are in your class, or you can make a private board that only people that only you can see. But one of the issues is many students have their own accounts, but if you create a board and have students post from their own accounts, all of a sudden they lose their privacy, because all of a sudden you can follow their pins back to their private stuff, and they may have pins that they may be very political. You never know what students are doing, and they may be things that are controversial, and that would be an invasion of privacy. And so a lot of people just kind of ignore that, but to me, I think that's a very serious issue with any kind of social media type thing.
So this is sort of an interesting thing. So I could sign up with, I have my own personal Gmail-based email address, a Pinterest account, right? But I could also have my johnmartin@wisconsin.edu account. It's linked to that email, but it would, like, I could say, Joe Blow or whatever, so that it wouldn't be associated with my name, but then I could talk to the instructor and say, well, this is actually mine, and
Yep.
but other people, that would be a way for them to get around having that exposure of, I'm a member of your class or whatever, and this is who I am.
Yep.
Right?
And so one of the drawbacks is, I think it's still like this, that you generally only get one account per email.
Right.
So if they're already using their WISC email
For their personal account.
for their personal, then
Right.
then it gets problematic. So there are ways around it. But what I've done is just created an account. I have my own personal presence where I can create an unlimited amount of email addresses.
Right.
So I just create a new one, and a new address that's related to the course number. And so this is what I've chosen to do. So that's an issue, and the way my way around it is to create one that and give everybody to log in. So that's what I've done, which is another way to do it. And let's see, I'm trying to see if I missed anything on my list here. So yeah, so just one thing to point out is Pinterest is not designed for teaching. It's Canvas is, but because of that, it also has some limitations, right? It's that something designed for teaching has teaching limitations, whereas Pinterest is not designed for teaching. It has different types of limitations than Canvas. Canvas is very good about keeping things within your course, and the students only see each other's work and things like that, or you can make it so that other students don't see your comments. But the big thing, so talking about what I would do different, and I've done this in the past, I think I've done it enough times where I don't have as many, I wish I would do it this way. I think it seems to be working pretty well, but just being aware that creating a way for students to safely post is interesting, because the students don't realize it's maybe not a good idea, but I think that there's always that chance that they will, have problems and that their privacy will be breached. And FERPA is, I don't know, they don't talk about Pinterest, but I think that if you look at it, probably public posts on Pinterest would be a violation of that at some point. It could be. So, the low-tech solution that I have is create an account specifically for the course, and I just give everyone the password. So I have two. I'll come back to that, and then they just post, and nobody knows who they are, and they can still create boards and stuff. They can put I encourage them to put their first name, although in the example we have, they put their last name, and I just figure, well, at some point, I tell them don't do that, and if they do it anyway, it's like that's more their choice whether they want to be public or not. Also then the issue is, the downside to that is if you have a common account, how do you grade, right? Because everybody's logging in under the same name. That's the thing that Canvas is great at. I love Canvas because I can see the date and time when they upload their assignments, and they could be in Florida on the beach, as I always tell them. You can be down there, I won't know the difference, but I will see the date and time. And with Pinterest, you see the date and time, but you don't know who they are if they log on to the same. So you have to think about how to administer it and create some rules. Then the other nice thing is that everyone's creating a community board. So it gives students an opportunity to be together in the same room. Canvas is a little alienating sometimes, depending on how you set it up. There are opportunities for discussions, but when people turn things in, I have this problem now. I want everybody to see what the other students are doing, but generally I have to, there's other ways to do this, but I download it all and then upload it to a box folder, which is kind of so I'm hacking Canvas, really, because I want them to turn it into their own folder. I want them to have their private dialogue with me, but I want the other students to see the actual work. So I think Canvas has got a limitation there too, yeah?
So are your students mostly finding stuff within Pinterest, or do they go outside of Pinterest and bring it into Pinterest?
We do it both ways. So I have two examples, and one is where they find it mostly on Pinterest, and another one where they're posting their own things. But it can work either way, depending on what your needs for the course are. So the humanities, is a great question. That's where I'm at. So I paid him to do that.
Yeah, right.
And I'm talking fast because you ask a professor to do a 10-minute presentation, and I'm used to 50 minutes to 2 hours.
We factor that in.
So it's like, whoa, 10 minutes. I better talk really fast. So I'll show you two examples here. And so one is for a humanities course. How many people are in the humanities? Anybody? Yeah. So they're not. I mean, humanities courses and other courses are not that much different. But I think humanities courses especially lend themselves to that. But also engineering. Engineering, and there are many things that are very visual. And so the first one is, and hopefully I'll go right there. I didn't even think to see if I'm logged in. I had it up. It should go there. So this is for a course called Design Trends. And so for that, we're looking at different theoretical approaches to design that have happened in the last 15 years, which is something that you can't find a textbook on. History doesn't start until at least 50 years ago, if you talk to a historian. So how do you teach stuff that isn't in the book? So if I want to teach current history for my students who are designers, and also in this class are people who are doing buying for retail stores, so there's a variety of people, and some are artists and things like that. How do you look at stuff that's been done in the last 10, 15 years? Because there's no textbooks on it. Historians won't touch it with a 10-foot stick because history, is far away. So what do? So this is a very helpful thing, because essentially you can write your own textbook. And so what I've done with this course is I created these categories, and we look at different movements in design. So one is Victorian design through some of the modernism. So that board is starts about 1850 and goes through 1960, which is a big period. Managed to cram it all in, but we look at stuff there because it's just a background. And we look at, in this course, we're looking at clothing, architecture, interior design, and industrial design. So you can see a variety of, in this particular course, what I do is I start out posting things that I find for that period. This is a Mondrian-inspired dress. And I think it talks about it down here. It's a Yves Saint Laurent, 1961. He was born in Algeria. We find that on here. Okay, all this information comes, I believe this was reposted from somewhere else. But I started out with, in this course, I started out posting things that were my standard things that I had from previous years, and then the students started posting their own things. And so it's a way to generate content for your course. It's a little cheating in a way, because next semester I can use this, what the students came up with, but it's a way for students to get involved.
That's what's
with.
so brilliant about it. That's where I think that it's, and the students then feel like they've contributed, so
Yes.
it's not just sending in an assignment for you and it's going to end up in a dustbin somewhere, but no, it's being used for next semester.
So they're essentially writing the textbook. And that gives them a different approach. They feel empowered by that. And you teach history and you're always telling them about what other people have decided about history, and then you give them a paper and say, now you decide. It's a switch of gears that is hard to do, but what this does is lets them write history.
Do you have them put in some sort of citations or references?
That's the thing with Pinterest, is you can actually find where this stuff comes from. And I have not gotten to the point where I say, oh, you have to say, if they're bringing it from somewhere that doesn't have the citations, I'm not going back and checking that. But that's one of the drawbacks, is it's possible to have things that are not well documented. And that's where we go every week. We go through and look at these, and sometimes I say, well, this is actually from a different time period. Maybe we should move it to a different board. And you can just do that in real time. And I have the students do that, and I say, because we're all logging into the same account, I say, if you see something that looks like it's in the wrong place, move it. Move it over to the other thing. So that can be an issue. You have to be careful about that, and making sure that, because otherwise it's like, we could say this is from this time period, and we can have something and that happens from the 16th century, and it's in the Victorian board, and it's like, oh, that's a different time period.
I've got a question about the logistics and the classroom management of having 15 different people, or however many people, all trying to control the board. Do you find that people are like, I want mine at the top of the board, and they just keep sort of rearranging each other's work every week? Are there any
I've never had an issue with that,
conflicts
because it's like, sometimes I start at the bottom of the board, sometimes I start at the top, and I can't remember which end it goes on first. But it does have an order, and it's actually not that easy to rearrange.
Okay.
I mean, you can do that, but it's not that easy.
problem.
And I think I just try to set up a classroom where it doesn't really matter. We're all having fun together, and it's not about who does it as much. And I'll go into one way that I keep track of who posts. But on a board like this, nobody knows who posted these, because we're all logged into the same thing. We don't know who that was.
I was gonna ask, some more questions. Since you said that you do carry on the content to the next semester, do you have a problem with it getting too much, and you would be better off having sections? Because I have 5,000 pins on like cake, for example.
Mhm.
Like I find that
Yep.
eventually I can't find the one that I want, so I have
Yep.
to like divide them. So
You
does that
created the internet on your own Pinterest board, basically.
Well, yeah,
Does
actually,
that
that
work for all
5,000
of
is
you?
pretty normal. That's one of the things with Pinterest. I've never thought that it was bad to have too many pins.
But
It's
then,
just-
like, do you go through them and organize them,
Yeah.
or like who does that
Mhm.
work? Does that end up being like your work?
So during the class, I encourage students to do that, but I also go through and just do that. And at some point, you do have too many pins, but that's part of the beauty of Pinterest is that the idea is that you see an incredible amount of information. Like in a textbook, there might be one photo that covers 50 years worth of history. Of its history. I'm not a historian. It sounds like I am, but you know, this particular course it was a course that does history, so it's very lends itself to that. But on the other hand, like, how can you have too many pins? You know, like.
Like, so textbooks, you know, every photo is very expensive. In
Yeah.
Pinterest, it's very, you know, it's
Yeah.
absolutely free.
But at some point, I would go through and edit things to make sure that they're pins that are very to the point of what I want students to see. So when they start out, I don't leave everything in there.
So you're gonna talk about like including the keywords in the description and stuff? Because like my issue is like sometimes I remember I pinned something but I can't find it if I have too
Okay.
many.
Yep. And so that I'll talk about that's more in the practice part. I think that's in the but that's one of the things you do keywords for them, and when you post from somewhere else on Pinterest, the keywords come with it. You can add keywords, but that's an issue. So that's where, as an instructor, you kind of have to start editing it, and because the students aren't necessarily going to do that. And you know, if you haven't, like I said, if you have them posting, they sometimes will post in the wrong board, you know, and rather than me going through and policing it, though, that's a chance to go through with the class and go, okay, now, do any of these not belong? You know, it's like Sesame Street. Which one of these do not go together? And that's a way to teach. So the students start looking at it and going, oh, you know, and nobody knows what it is usually. So it's not like, oh, Johnny or Mary, you know, bad student, you know, slap them with the ruler or something. Because nobody knows at this point who did it. So it's more just looking through and in a discussion, you know who's saying this stuff. You can say, well, that's not a good idea. But here, it's kind of anonymous. Although I'll show you a way that I get around that. So, so there are issues with that, and it requires some work. Did you have a?
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask, so I think that component of sort of revisiting the pins and having the students do quality control and give feedback on the different pins is really valuable. Do you have some sort of process or expectations set up to kind of guide students through that?
Yep. And for that, let's see if I go back to my PowerPoint. So I believe that I included, so this is actually an assignment. It's great, leading into my next slide. I paid her to do that. This is the assignment sheet for one thing. So this is for different courses. I'll show you that other example. So this one I wanted them to generate their own content. So that one was more history based, even though a historian would say that's not history, but it was more about current design. This one's for a course that was about called Interior Architectural Design, and it's really about building technology and about things about buildings. So I could look around here, and my students could come in here and we start taking photos for this assignment. So it was about something about detailing. They didn't know what that meant. It means something very specific to architects and interior designers. So I wanted them to start understanding what a detail was. And so, so what I did was I gave them a project outline, create a board for yourself on the Pinterest page. So I gave them the name of the page, the link to that, the password, fall 2017. So they all had the same password, which is a problem. What if somebody goes, sometimes every once in a while you wake up in the middle and say, I gave everybody the password to the site. What if one student goes on there and accidentally deletes the whole thing? And I'm laughing because it's perfectly possible, you know, that in Canvas there are backups and stuff. If your TA deletes something, I believe there's a way to get it back. If the TA and that's happened in not to me but to my colleagues, where a TA will go in and change the grade on something that they don't like. I'm serious about it. Has anybody had that happen? but you can see who did it, right, in Canvas. You can't see that in Pinterest. So you've got to, you have to trust people. And so there's always the chance that someone will be mad at you and go in and delete the whole thing, and it's all gone. I'm laughing because, you know, and so I just accept that that's a possibility, but I hope that the way I did have my classes is that no one will ever do that, and I don't tell them about it, so most of them don't think about it. So give them the password, and then it says put your first name as the name on your board. So I tell them to make a board that says their first name. I tell them we'll be posting throughout the semester, and so they'll post their pins on their board. So that's how I keep track of them for grading. And then the assignment is look for 5 details you'll find interesting and work well. Take a photo of each one. So I have them take a photo, and pin them on the board with your name, and also on the board wonderful details. So this is, I want them to try to figure out, to understand what's a good detail. So I have them pin that, because we're going to go back and discuss them and go, well, is that really a good detail? So like back in this room, we have a detail where there is exposed conduit coming down a brick wall. The brick wall is beautiful. The conduit is like, what the heck did they do there? Obviously they put that in later. I would have them take a photo of that. If that showed up in the wonderful details, I'd say, well, maybe that's not a great detail. But then we also say, look for 5 details that are problematic and do not work well. I'd have them hopefully they take a photo of that. So we could do this entire assignment in this room probably. There are things that, you know, like the fact that I can't see the screen while I'm talking to you. That's a bad detail. And then choose one of your details for the divine detail board. So we have a board that we can put, the whole class can put their favorite details on. So it's going to be a smaller board, so they get to pick that, and then we can talk about it. And then also say use the PowerPoint insert photo album feature to create a PowerPoint photo album of your photos, label the divine detail as well as other categories, and submit the file to the assignment on Learn-EW, and that's how I graded. So they're actually having to post several times, but because it's so easy to post, it's not like that part of the thing. And they're asked to seamlessly move between different technological platforms, but that's good for them, right? That's what I look at it. And so then I use this for my grading, and then we use these things for discussion. And the students go and look at this stuff, and later in the semester, when I say, you know, I give an exam, I say, you know, give an example of a good detail. They can, I do the exams where they can go on the internet, because I ask questions, or I might ask a question, you know, what about the detail in that room in Middleton? You know, what's the problem with that? And they, you know, it's like it's something they can't look up in Google. It's like where they have to go and check that out and think about it. So it could be used as a way to just create more references, like the Google papers where they just Google something and cut and paste 100 pages and create a 100-page paper in 5 minutes. Anybody have that happen? You know, it's possible. But it depends on how you use it. But the way I use it, they actually have to go back and think about it. So does that kind of make sense how that's set up?
So what's in the PowerPoint that they actually submit?
Their images that they posted to.
So it's kind of like a replicate of.
It is a duplicate. So
do you want? I mean, or do you, when you grade, do you look at those images, or do you go to Pinterest? To look
I actually look at those because it's easier for me.
Right?
Because then they put it in Canvas and it's time and date stamp. But I could also do it on Pinterest as well, and I'll show you. So for that course, it's a little different. And so for this course, for this assignment, they were posting their own original stuff. I mean, it's a requirement; they have to do that. But for others, then they could repost things. So what happened there, so each student, I think there were maybe 27 or 20 students, and it's scalable. So 5 students, you think, okay, that's doable. But even with that many students, it was kind of doable. And I could have graded off of here, and so sometimes they made a mistake on their submittal, their PowerPoint, and I said, oh, why are they missing this stuff? And I would go back and look on the boards to see what they had. But also it was a good exercise in following instructions, which, I don't know, I think that's a valuable job skill. So this is for that course, and because, I mean, that's like we're professors or instructors, and we don't always teach that as a job skill, like being able to follow instructions. We just like, oh well, you know. So this is for the course, and so some students put their, and so now I'm sharing their names with you. It's like, oh, terrible, but they're in public. They chose to put their last name. I said, put your first name. So each student has their board. And this is sort of how, if you haven't seen Pinterest, this is how it works. So you have boards. You can follow them. So there are people that are somewhere over in Transylvania following some of these boards. And sometimes I get, when you first post it especially, they update you with emails every time somebody follows you or something. And it's just interesting to see that. And I share that with the students. And so each student has their stuff. And then throughout the semester, we posted different things. This is one of their divine details. Somebody said, oh, look at the way that molding turns the corner there. It's just very beautiful. That was great stuff. So this is a photo that they took. This is their content. And then on other assignments, they were looking at other things. So these are the good ones. They were looking at lighting and stuff. And I mean, just even something as simple as this. This is a photo that the students took. This is actually probably, I have one of these in my office. I'm sure that the students took this. So at some point, you're not sure who took it, but I know this is. So now all of a sudden, the students are creating content that's going out into the world. And that's something that I just think it changes their whole worldview when all of a sudden they're creating history. They're creating a textbook in a way that, and so then, and then this is the tag that goes with it. And so if somebody else posts that on Transylvania or something, that source goes with it. So I think these ones are mostly ones that they took photos of themselves. And also then you were asking about keywords. These are actually some of the people who posted. And they're also, you can also set up keywords for your stuff. That's where, for what I use it, I'm not as careful about that because we're not as concerned about the rest of the world finding it. But I also set up things, like on the other course, it was set up for specific time periods and different movements in design. So just the name of the board is one way to search. And so if you search, maybe I'll go back to that, it'll show you that. And then throughout the semester, people would find other stuff that was interesting to them, and just.
So they could use the tag, their name as the tag, and then you could very easily find all of the things
That would be another way to do it, yeah. But I had them each do their own board, and then they double post here, and they still make the other one, and it's in terms of the course, this is how Pinterest is made to be used, but that gave me a way to grade them on what they posted, but also then people can say, oh, where did that come from, or what's my classmate up to, and they get to know each other because then you start seeing, oh, this person has got similar interests to me. And that's part of Pinterest, is it's a way of connecting with people who have similar interests. It's another part of it, which is kind of cool, It's as a teacher, it's a very interesting thing. And then going back to this one, so that one was mostly original content. Going back to this one, then each post is each board is from a different thing. So I've got stuff like board and tattoo culture, and these are some of the tags here that come up. So they're suggesting that we click on one of these based on the content of this board and go somewhere else. So this is a part of design. So we're looking at furniture that's influenced by tattoos and stuff, which pretty cutting edge. Well, it actually was 8 years ago. Now it's pretty. I first started talking about 8 or 10 years ago, and there wasn't anyone on the internet. Now there are thousands of boards that talk about this on Pinterest. So it's a way to get stuff out there. If we click on one of those, let's click under, well, let's put a body art. Hopefully nothing objectionable will come up, but so we can go from that to body art, and you can look at where people who are designing furniture created on body art are getting their ideas from. So it's really exciting when you think about, I can't buy a textbook that shows me what's happening in tattoo shops. There's no thing there. I can do a Google search, but these ones have all been put together. This is not my board. This is just things under tattoo shops. And so, it's whoops, where do we go?
There's a sense of human curation in that respect, whereas
Yeah.
Google would not
No,
have that.
No, and they won't pick up this. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to find anything on Google. And I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but it's really hard to find things that haven't been paid for.
Yeah.
And Pinterest doesn't. They don't get paid for anything. And these are things that are posted by regular people. So, you know, you get things like signs, and you know, you think, oh, it could be all people's tattoos, but it's actually all these other things as well, because it's about the shop. And so, so for my students that are designers, we're like looking at what's the future of design. One of the futures is this kind of stuff, and you may not be used to seeing a chair that's in the shape of a skull, but I believe Urban Outfitters has a lot of furniture right now that's created that way. If you've been in Urban Outfitters, 10 years ago they didn't. And that's when we first started. I first made this board maybe 8 or 10 years ago. So this stuff was way out in the fringe. Now you go into Urban Outfitters and it's right there. And even you can go to JCPenney and they have skull socks for kids, or no, Target. They have skull socks. So you can see things, trends and stuff that you wouldn't see otherwise. So I think does that kind of give an overview of different ways to use it? And
Do you bring that up in your course? Like, do you like save these Pinterest pages and say, oh, 10 years ago this was kind of cutting edge. Now you're seeing this in Target or
Yep.
JCPenney's.
Yep.
And is that something you market into it, and how
Yep.
do students respond to that?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's one of the beauties of it is I can bring that in, and so I use these as part of a, you know, it's not just a lecture at that point, because a lot of times it's stuff that they posted. So I think that the stuff at the bottom is what I posted originally. No, maybe not. I don't remember. It's been 2 years since I taught. I was on sabbatical last year. I don't remember anything before that. But yeah, but that's one of the beauties of it. It gives you a way to talk about things that are, so in a textbook, they don't have any buy-in to the images there, whereas here, this is their stuff. So we can talk about it. We can talk about, okay, you got a big cleaver here with blood on it. Is that something that is going to be part of our everyday stuff? And really it is. If you go to Target, there's stuff like that. And so it lets you talk about things, and then I don't have to say, well, what about this? We can just see it. I can go down there and say, what do you want to talk about today? And which one looks kind of like out there?
So to what extent is this central to your face-to-face lectures? Is that part of every session? You bring up the board?
This
and you just
particular
sort of
course, yeah.
use that as?
Yep, because we're talking about these different historical things. So generally, I mean, as an instructor, each one of these boards is a different lecture. So the way the course is structured is we look at a different style. We look at diesel punk and cyberpunk are the same lecture, but they're different things. But that lets me come in and talk about that, and that instead of doing a PowerPoint, I use this.
So that, do you use I'm thinking of do you have them submit things beforehand, then you talk about them, and then they continue to submit stuff?
Yep.
Or, all right,
Yep.
so
So
that
there-
first set of submissions, you might be like, this maybe is actually Victorian, and should
Yep,
go here.
yep. And the fact that something's posted improperly, and then from as an instructor, I get to make that choice, but we can talk about it rather than saying, it's wrong
Right.
place, which is what happens on an assignment. Say, well, do any of these look like they don't belong here? And they say, well, what about that one up there? Maybe that should be in a different board, and we can talk about it. It's a way for the students to engage with the material.
Do you find that students continue to post to boards that are from a couple weeks ago or even a couple months ago, so they're
They-
Or even a couple years
revisiting
ago.
Yep.
past
Still
course
have.
material?
Yep, they will do that, not as much, but yeah, that's what happens, because they'll come across things, especially there tend to be some students that are just crazy about it. So on this one, this was not a huge class, let's see. So Carly had 66 pins, Yunhee had 550 pins. So, like on their own board, so I want them to double post. So she's got 550 pins. Obviously, she's really into it. So I require a certain amount, but then there are students that just go for it. I mean, And she was a textile designer. Hopefully I'm not giving too much personal information, but you know, it's like, you can see from the board, even if you didn't know that, that's what she's interested in. So there are much less personal in furniture things, but she still, as she went through, she started getting more interested in, you can see it, right? She started out with all the clothing, started getting more involved in the architecture and stuff, which was something outside of her field. And so, you know, you say, oh, how do you measure whether they're learning something? Because part of the goals of the course is to get them to see how architecture and clothing tie together. You can see it right here. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but so
You can watch
it's
this
just
develop
really,
and,
it's
yeah.
really obvious for the student, and you know, and then also, yeah, it's just so some of them do and some of them don't. That's, but there are people that maybe still, I don't know if they're still posting or not, but. And some of them posted here, and then they posted the same stuff on their personal pages. And I can tell because sometimes you can go back, or you can find their, you know, I don't normally do that, but you can, so really, some of them are really into it. Other people are just, they post what they need to get the grade. But the ones that are into it are really into it. And
Well, one of the things that I think is really sort of fun and great learning about this is it's not an activity that's like, oh, it's Thursday night, I need to go do my homework, and you know, you focus on this. They collect this all the time. You know, they see something online and they're like, it might be Saturday morning, I'm gonna put it. It might be Tuesday afternoon, I'm gonna put it. So they're revisiting, thinking about your course, thinking about the content of the course throughout their week as they put together 550
Yep.
pins. And that, you know, the educational psychology, learning science folks will say, evidence of good learning.
Yep, and so
Constant
that's what
learning.
that's what we want them to do. And this actually, not every student, there's still some that are the night before, you know, because I look at it and go, wow, where's their stuff, you know?
Right.
But clearly this is somebody who was really, they couldn't do 550 pins over the course of the semester unless they were doing them on a regular basis.
Right.
And so it's every instructor's dream, you know, and it's great for that.
And the one where they're curating, or where they're collecting their own photos, their original stuff, where they go into buildings and they take a picture of the conduit, for example. That's another one where wherever you go,
Yep.
you know, we have our phones with us now,
Yep.
so I should do this. This will help me with the class.
Yep, and the mechanics of it, I don't know if you're going to look at that, but the mechanics of it is that there's an app you put into your computer that's a pin app, and when you're on a website or something, you just click the thing, and it says, do you want to pin this, and what board do you want to pin it to, and then it just pins it for you. And so,
Yeah, the Chrome browser extension or Firefox browser,
Yep.
Safari, I think they all have.
yep, Internet Explorer does it. Yep.
Even Internet Explorer
Yep.
has it.
I use that. I hate to say, I use that because to me it always works for me. You know,
Oh.
like, you know. The other ones, when you do certain things, like some of them don't use other. I'm just saying, but it works on all those things. Yep.
On the Victorian board or the diesel punch board, how do you rate on that one when it's not a personal board, like the Victorian board?
So what happens is they're in this class they're required to do a certain number of posts per week, and so that's why they have their personal boards, and I go back and look at the personal board in this course. The other one I made them do the PowerPoint.
PowerPoint?
I made them do a PowerPoint of what they posted and put it on Canvas.
Oh.
And that's how I graded.
And that's for like the ones with the Victorian.
Not the one with the details and stuff.
Oh, okay.
And this one, I just looked. I think I said they had to do so many per week.
Okay. How do you know
On
who
their
put on the
personal.
Victorian board though? If they're all logged in the same and it's not an
Right.
individual
You mean
pin?
like
Because-
on a group board?
In the
How do
group
you-
board, yeah,
how do you
like the-
grade?
yeah,
'Cause
the
you don't
Victorian
know.
design.
Because they have their personal board. So then, which end is the
Mhm.
Victorian on?
So they post their personal board and then to yours?
So yeah, they had to post to both of them.
Oh, okay.
So I would grade. I think this is the Victorian one.
What's the
So this is the personal board, and it's down there. See, you can see it's getting more historical, and this is more Art Deco. So if I keep going down over those 550 posts, it'll get down to where they were. So on this course, I just said you have to post so many per week. Double post, put one in the board, and in the board for the topic, put one of them in your personal one. So there are two records then. There's the group board, and then there's their personal board. And so these are starting to be more Victorian, or actually that was one of the discussions, is these aren't actually Victorian, these are current, but it's like neo-Victorian. Which, So that's where it's a great discussion, because this is all contemporary stuff. It's not Victorian. And then this student actually does work that looks like, I saw some of her work, she does work that looks like this. She's actually posted some of her own work to some of these boards, which is an even more interesting thing when they start putting themselves into
The history.
Yeah. So they're, I mean, it's just, so this is really exciting. You know, I'd love to just like scale this up and do an online course like for 500 people, and because I think it's very powerful. Am I running out of time, or? I've gone over 10 minutes.
You know, you got, but it's okay. You've all used Pinterest. Was that earlier on when we said yes, or have maybe? Well, okay. So we have opportunities to get in and look at that on your own. I don't think we'll do it all together. Does anyone have any other ideas on how this could be used? I can see, like, in engineering, like, all right, we're gonna learn about cams today. Go take pictures of cams that you see in the next week, and we'll come back in and see a huge variety of cams in everyday life, in the lives that we live. Engineering, sort of the design study areas, architecture, obviously.
I think even like things that are not visual, like music, I could see a lot of visual opportunities anyway.
You could post scores.
Right.
Yeah, my degree is undergraduate degree is in music. It's like, yep, music. You can post scores. You can post things about instruments. You can also post historical context.
Halls, whatever.
Yep, concert halls. And what is neat is that you can, if you set up your assignment, you can say, with the cams, you say, these cams got good ratings, these got bad ratings. So you can start being discriminated about what you post, even though you're just, I mean, it lets students have this.
Metal cams, plastic cams, you know, cams and industrial engineering cams and.
Yeah, and you can, and then they have the opportunity to post to the wrong board, and then you can talk about it. You know, it's a, yep.
Do you see students being able to take Pinterest outside of your classroom as a tool professionally?
Yep. I think a lot of my students in particular do that. Because when they're working on a project, other projects I don't. When they're doing a design project, they design a presentation. Right now I'm teaching a course where they're designing restaurants, and they all have their own boards. They do that, and I think that so a lot of them I had previously for the course, the other course that I showed you, and I think they were already doing it, but I just encouraged them to do that, and they'll show me stuff on their Pinterest page in this class. I'm not requiring it or anything, but they're going through and doing it. So I guess the answer is yes to that.
It seems a lot like when if you're doing design work or something, you need to come up with some sort of vision board. It's like, well, let's just do this together on Pinterest.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty common thing, especially if you're in some sort of visual field, is making some, like a Pinterest resume, and it's just your own work.
Oh,
So
really?
you just
Portfolio,
upload your own
Pinterest. Okay.
images, and then you can, add the text about the details.
How about in physical therapy? What would Pinterest look like in physical therapy? Like
So one
different
challenge
niche
of
shots?
physical therapy is teaching patients how to do exercises that they're supposed to be doing at home with the correct technique that you can get with the feedback that you have in the clinic with the patient. So you could post videos of, here's the positioning you should be, attaining while you're doing this movement or this exercise, or something like that.
I can see it really making like a caster or something for other professionals to make.
Yeah, or even just anatomy.
Orthotic or something.
Yeah, it's helpful to be able to see exactly what's happening on the inside of the body and why your pain is here instead of here. And so you could post, pictures of the anatomy and explanations and stuff.
Mr. Cobb?
Yes, I was wondering as well.
So just as a real-time thing, so I can do a search on physical therapy, and then I might look under exercises, right there, and and so this may or may not be useful, but right away, without creating new content, you start seeing sacroiliac pain exercises. That sounds like I'm an expert now. It's like, I know what that is. Yeah, well, I thought I'd talk to you today about sacroiliac exercises. Not gonna give a lecture about it. I just typed it in. So this is something that you can't really do on Google the same way. or if you do it on Google, a lot of times it comes back to Pinterest anyway.
Yeah.
So,
So what would you do differently if you had the next time you do this? What are you gonna do differently? What is a mistake you made in the past that you need to correct?
I feel like I've got a lot of the things I'm doing is because I made the mistakes in the past. I've done it enough times. I still would like a better way, because I was saying I do the PowerPoint, or the grading part is still a little, it's awkward, because I'm asking them to post in several different ways. It would be, but I'm not sure how to resolve that. But that's the thing that I felt is awkward.
Do you have them do that just so they submitted something, or do you prefer to look at the sites in Canvas versus Pinterest?
It's much easier for me to keep track of what they're doing in Canvas.
Just so there's something to grade.
Yeah, because it's.
I'm taking a class online where the instructor just told us to write the text done. Like all we have to say is done, and then she knows where to. Cause like we post websites. So she just looks at the website, she does not need to see any content in the submission itself.
I've seen that where people say, just as soon as you get done, post the link to the website, and as soon as I see that post to that link there, I can just click on it.
You have something to
Now
do.
I know that you've done it, and I can go into the grade post.
But there's less work for the student, they don't have to post it
Right,
in 2 different
right.
places.
Right.
And so it's sort of a trade-off. So I have to decide. I like the fact that their own board is cumulative. Where because it creates this whole document, and I could have them create a sub board like for this week and that week. But to me, so I've made the decision not to do that. That would be one way to that's sort of what they're doing there. So I think that's one of the issues with Pinterest is how do you grade it, and I think that's an issue. And I think originally I was having problems with the privacy thing, but I think just having a group board seems to work.
I was also curious if you still have other types of assignments that they are graded on, or has this replaced like papers or projects?
They still do. Yeah, they still do other stuff.
Do they?
I'm an old guy. I still want to see a paper. I mean, I want them to be able to write about it. But this is another a way to start their writing. So when I say I have a paper, I say, well, go find some or design. I say, go find some images, post them. We'll talk about them, and then you write your paper. So it's a way to get them into it, and you can post images on any topic, like exercise. I wasn't sure, but there it is.
Yeah, I think that'd be sort of a fun thing to just have anybody is it using your field? Type in some keywords and see.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of time. We are a minute over, actually. So please help me thank Mark for coming and sharing. I would love to see this in Canvas, like integrated with Canvas, so that you can solve that problem of how do I know.
Yep. And there are people who, I think there are some people who have used it in Canvas, but I think that what they've often done is they're using it to generate content for their lectures. And what they're doing is they're pasting the HTML from this page, a page like this, or a board, they're pasting that into Canvas.
Just to embed it.
And it's embedded, and so then that's a way to bring it. To me, it's like, why not just go to, even though you lose control. And the other problem is, now this may all disappear,
Right.
So I need to archive that one course.
That reminds me, I should.
Yeah. And if anybody has questions or is trying some, I'd love to hear what people are doing. If people have tried it, and also if you have questions, just email me. I think my email is somewhere. It's mark.nelson@wisc.edu. It's very easy to
remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.